ChatGerry, why CGM A1C shows more damage than lab. A1C, time, spikes, and hidden glycation energy, number 1498, VPT Sharp 059, January 9, 2026. Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation. Category, Diabetes, Systems Medicine, Metabolic Physics. Preface. After living with type 2 diabetes for more than 36 years, I gradually realized that most glucose indicators used in clinical practice are designed for classification, not for explaining damage. Numbers such as laboratory-tested hemoglobin A1C are convenient and familiar, but they hide time, variability, and nonlinear stress effects that actually drive diabetic complications. For many years, my lab-tested hemoglobin A1C looked acceptable while my body was still absorbing damage. I did not understand why until I stopped treating glucose as a medical label, and started viewing it as a physical process evolving over time. Once I applied my GH-math physical research method and the Viscoplastopology framework, I began to study glucose behavior as a stress-strain system governed by time, spikes, nonlinear response, and irreversible energy accumulation. That shift in viewpoint led to a striking and reproducible finding. When laboratory hemoglobin A1C is used as the strain input in a VMT analysis, total accumulated energy is low. When CGM-derived hemoglobin A1C is used instead, total energy becomes about 3.3 times higher, even though both are expressed as annual averages. At first glance, this seems contradictory. It is not. Why two A1C values tell different stories? Laboratory hemoglobin A1C is already a heavily filtered signal. Hemoglobin glycation averages glucose exposure over roughly 3 to 4 months. Short spikes, rapid swings, and brief overload events are naturally smoothed out by this biological process. When those lab-tested hemoglobin A1C values are then further averaged again on an annual basis, the signal is filtered twice. By the time the number reaches the physician, much of the time, dependent stress information is already gone. From a physics perspective, laboratory hemoglobin A1C behaves like a low-pass filter. It keeps slow background trends and removes fast changes. An everyday analogy is a long exposure photograph. Moving objects disappear, leaving only a blurred average position. In one snapshot, CGM-derived hemoglobin A1C works differently. It is computed from dense time series glucose data first. Peaks, oscillations, recovery speed, and asymmetry all influence the result before any annual averaging occurs. Once nonlinear damage has accumulated, averaging cannot undo it. CGM-derived A1C information like watching a movie. In physical systems, averaging does not commute with damage. Tissue injury from glucose behaves more like fatigue than static loading. Repeated small spikes can generate large, irreversible damage even when the average looks safe. That is why CGM-based hemoglobin A1C metrics retain time memory, while laboratory-tested hemoglobin A1C largely does not. What the VMT analysis shows. Using identical stress inputs and identical normalization factors, I ran 2 VMT analyses. The only difference was the strain definition. When laboratory hemoglobin A1C was used as strain, total VMT energy was low at a level of 0.75. When CGM-derived hemoglobin A1C was used as strain, total VMT energy was at a level of 2.47, about 3.3 times higher. Importantly, the energy contribution ratios from fasting spikes, post-meal spikes, and baseline glucose remain nearly identical in both analyses. This tells us something critical. Laboratory hemoglobin A1C compresses the magnitude of accumulated damage, but it does not change the structure of where that damage comes from. The stress sources are the same, only the strain magnitude is reduced. This confirms that the difference is physical, not statistical. Longitudinal evidence from my own data. From 2018 to 2021. My CGM-derived hemoglobin A1C was consistently higher than my laboratory hemoglobin A1C. During that period, my glucose pattern contained frequent spikes and high variability that CGM captured but lab testing smoothed away. After sustained lifestyle changes took hold, especially from 2022 onward, my CGM-derived hemoglobin A1C dropped below laboratory hemoglobin A1C. CGM responded quickly to reduce spike burden and improve dynamics, while laboratory hemoglobin A1C remained elevated, due to accumulated past glycation and slow red blood cell turnover. This crossover from 2021 to 2022 is not a contradiction. It is exactly what a time-dependent system should do. CGM-derived hemoglobin A1C is forward-looking and sensitive to current behavior. Laboratory hemoglobin A1C is backward-looking and dominated by history. Conclusion: CGM-derived hemoglobin A1C shows more damage than laboratory hemoglobin A1C because it preserves time, structure, spikes, and nonlinear strain history before averaging. Laboratory hemoglobin A1C removes much of this information through biological and procedural filtering. Exclusive reliance on laboratory hemoglobin A1C can therefore underestimate true metabolic stress and create a false sense of safety. This is not a criticism of medicine. It is a reminder that statistical averages are not the whole story. When time, variability, and spikes matter, physics matters. Understanding this difference allows patients and clinicians to see glucose control more clearly, and to assess risk with greater awareness of accumulated damage, rather than comfort from a single filtered number. Disclaimer: I write this paper not for fame, but to share what I have learned so others can understand their health, prevent disease, and live longer, healthier lives. This content is provided for educational reference only, and does not constitute medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered, edited, or republished as your own. All intellectual property rights and copyrights for this article and its related materials belong to the author, Gerald C.